I've been a big fan of Dutch. Been reading his books for a while, and then he was being published by Arbor House, and I called that company to see if there was some chance that he would come to New York to do a signing at my bookshop, and they seemed surprised at this and said, "Oh, you want him to come? Okay, we'll send him." I didn't think it would be that easy, but it was. They did send him, and I'd never met him. I'd never seen him. I'd read his books, but I picked up one of the most recent books. In fact, the one that he was coming to sign, and I hadn't done it before. But I looked at the dust jacket flap, the back flap, and I saw a picture of Dutch, a photo, and he was kind of squinting and had a little cap on, and he looked like the toughest guy in the world. And it just scared me. I thought, man, I hope I don't say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing in any way, because this guy beat the shit out of me. So, so I'm waiting for him to come up. My bookshop in those days had a spiral staircase that came up to the second floor where I was waiting for him. And he came up, he was wearing the cap and kind of squinting. And he said, "Are you Otto?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "I'm Elmore Leonard, and I got to thank you for inviting me to your store." And he came over and hugged me, hugged me. So I said, "Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm really glad." I was both happy and somewhat relieved that the reason he came to me was for a hug, not for a punch in the face. So almost immediately we started chatting and having no trouble making conversation, enjoying each other's company, laughing together, and so on. And we became very good friends. The next time I saw him was later that year. He came to New York to meet with Dustin Hoffman because a film was going to be made, and Hoffman had asked him to come to meet with him, and Hoffman put it off for a day, and he put it off for another day. This is just simply shortly before Christmas, and one of the traditions that my wife Carolyn and I had at that time was decorating a Christmas tree, a very big Christmas tree, back in my office, which had high ceilings. So he it was in the neighborhood, and he said, I'm waiting to hear from Hoffman and all, but I haven't heard from him a while. I don't have anything to do. Can I come over?" I said, "Sure." He helped us decorate the tree. It was a Sunday. It was a Sunday afternoon, so the store was closed, and we were decorating the tree. And I have photos of the toughest guy that I ever saw hanging little angels and deer on our Christmas tree. So it was a memory that I valued. I took this picture of him holding this little tree ornament, tough guy with this cute little ornament. We'd gotten to know each other a great deal over the next 15, 20 years. Whenever he came to New York, he would give me a heads up, and we would have dinner. And he was coming to New York quite a bit in those days. Uh, I think there were some filmed things involved, and by this time he's becoming more and more and more successful. And so there are interviews and other people that he was supposed to meet. So it was common for us to pick. He said, "You have to pick it. It's your city, but pick a great restaurant." And we wound up going to the best restaurants in New York, taking turns picking up the check. And it was a wonderful experience. He frequently came with his wife Joan, and the four of us would go to dinner at Lutece or any of the other great restaurants that were in New York at the time. Um, Let me think. There's something else that I wanted to talk about briefly, if I can only remember it. I forget things now, even in short bursts. Oh, I know. So there was another time he was in the store. I went to my office in the back to sign books. He was so popular that we had something like 300 or 400 books for him to sign. So as he was sitting there signing away, we said, you know what? And he loved to talk about his books in progress. He really, a lot of writers don't want to jinx it or talk about it at all, but he did. He loved to talk about his books. So the one that he was working on, he said, this is a thing that the New York Times wants me to do, and it's based on a true story, a true series of events about a prisoner of war camp in Oklahoma, where German POWs were brought and interned in this POW camp. And as he signed, I said, "That's true," and he said, "Yeah, it's absolutely historically accurate." I said, "Oh, I didn't know that." Um, so as he's sitting there signing, it was the weirdest thing. He said, "Can you give me a good German name?" I said, "Dutch, Otto." Otto's the most German name you could possibly imagine. How about Otto? And he said, "Yeah, Otto, Otto Penzler. Yeah, I got it." And that's how I became a character in Comfort to the Enemy, where I had a prominent role. SS Sturmbannführer Otto Penzler. I was a major with Rommel in Africa when I was captured. And then his sequel was a book called Up in Honey's Room, where I was a character again. Uh, Not a very major role, but I wound up hooking up with a Jewish bookseller and married her. And my career became a bookseller with this person in, I forget where, Cleveland. I think it might have been Cleveland. So that was my claim to immortality, is that I'm in two of Dutch's books. When University of South Carolina acquired his papers, all of his manuscripts and correspondence, contracts, all whatever it all was, I was asked to go down and speak at the when it was being announced. The president of the university was there, and of course the librarian who had bought it for a lot of money. And it's where I got to meet his family. I met his whole family for the first time, which was really nice. They treated me well. They bought the drinks at the bar. So even though Dutch wasn't there, he was represented well by the kids and their his grandkids and wives and whatever. So that was my last really major uh, time thinking or talking about Dutch.
Well, Otto, you played a major role in Dutch's reintroduction to the short story. Obviously, he had written, 30 Western short stories and a couple more after that. He did for John Jakes, he did The Tunnel Woman, and then he did, or wait, no, he did Arrive for Captain Early for John Jakes. But then after that, you picked up the slack, and this was really important. I was talking to Jim Hall about this, and just what a great short story writer he was.
He was indeed, and he became a go-to guy for me. There were several writers who I very much admired, who were really nice. They said yes pretty much every time I asked for a short story. Ed McBain was one of them. Donald Westlake was one. Joyce Carol Oates was one, and she had a great line because my anthologies had a point that there was a subject, and the one of my favorites was a baseball anthology which I titled Murderers Row after the 1927 Yankees, and Dutch wrote a wonderful short story for that. But I was asking Joyce to do one. She did one for my boxing anthology, and then I had another subject, and she said, to try to write a short story on a specific subject is really hard. It's like forcing a dream, which I always admired as a wonderful line. But yeah, Dutch wrote a story for Murder for Love, Murder for Revenge, and Murder and Obsession. I can't remember which of those three anthologies it was. I think he wrote one for all three. But in one of them, he introduced a character named Karen Cisco,
Karen makes
and
out.
which became a successful television series.
Well, it
So
became a novel out of sight.
and
He
yeah,
would he would use a few of the short stories were kind of auditions for the novel that he would write. He would audition the character. So in Karen Makes Out, he auditioned Karen Cisco, and then he took that storyline of she's hooked up with a bank robber as her
yeah,
boyfriend,
I
and then
remember.
he repurposed that in Out of Sight where they she's pursuing this guy, and then they have that lovers time out in Detroit, and then she shoots him again.
I think she arrested him in the short story.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, but she
yeah,
did shoot. I think she shot him in the leg or something.
or something like that.
Also,
Yeah,
yeah. And then, then he wrote Sparks, which was about the insurance adjuster, and that came pretty close to being. That didn't make it into the novel stage. And then he wrote Chickasaw Charlie Polk, as you indicated for the
the,
baseball book,
the baseball book. Yeah,
and that became he became like a an important secondary character in Tishomingo Blues.
yeah. He could create the remarkable thing about him is, well, for the short stories, but also as secondary characters, he could create memorable characters who really weren't the major, they weren't the protagonists, they weren't the major figures for the novels. But he would create a character who became fully developed and believable in a short story, which was really hard to pull off. But he did it over and over, as well as we've just discussed. Yeah, he was great about that.
And did you talk to him on the phone a lot?
Yeah, it was pretty common for him to call. Generally, if he was on his way to New York, he would call. I guess we had emailed already, but I can't even remember if we even used it. He mostly would prefer to talk on the phone. And then it was very common on the phone for him to start telling me about the new book and whatever book he was writing at the time. And I remember one of those times he was calling, he said, uh, God, Otto, I have a real problem. My major character got killed last night. And Dutch would frequently talk about his characters and real life people that they were kind of based on. And he'd been talking about this person and I believe me, it's too long ago for me to remember the character or the book or anything else. But the episode that I'm talking about, the incident that I'm talking about, is he'd been talking about the real life character who he used some of his characteristics for his fictional character. And he said, my I don't think he used the word hero, but my major character, central character, got killed last night, and I don't know what to do. So, what do you mean? You mean Joe, the real life person, or Jose, the character you based him on? He said, no, Jose. I said, so what do you mean? What do you mean you don't know what to do? Just rewrite the chapter and don't kill him. I said, oh, I can't do that. My characters do what they do. I have no control over that. Like, whoa, okay. Here's the difference between writers and the rest of us.
Yeah, he Joan would often say that he would take on the characteristics of some of his bad guys, and it could be unpleasant for a while living with him.
A beater.
No, but since you're the man when it comes to mystery, detection, suspense, every crime, everything. I mean, everything kind of comes back to you, Otto. But where do you put Dutch in the pantheon of all these great writers, many of whom he poo-pooed like Chandler, but really people that like Chandler like Dutch. But I mean, they're so different. But I mean,
There's there
where
Yeah, he berated me for liking Chandler so much. I thought Chandler was just the greatest. And he said, "No, too many words, Otto, too many words."
and
Uh,
writing cute. I mean, he thought that that was cute writing. The
no,
tarantula on the angel food and all that. All
yeah,
those.
no, that's what he may have thought of it. I thought it was brilliant. I just thought it was absolutely fabulous. Uh, but I think he had a tremendous influence. Dutch did. I mean, because it wasn't commonplace to have bad guys as your heroes or as your major central characters in books. It's become much more common now. But it used to be that the central character was a detective or a private eye or, a good person who is trying to put away bad guys. And in Dutch's books, the good guys were still bad guys. They were just not as bad as the bad guys.
Right.
And I think that was a really huge influence in one way. Also, I think the style that he used, where there was no colorful phrases that he valued the way Chandler did, who work on these. If you read Chandler's notebooks, you can see the similes that he was practicing or trying. And Dutch, I know you know this because it was commonly quoted. He said, when I reread the manuscript and I see some really beautiful writing, I get rid of it. So, he it was all about being succinct and being quick and witty. And so his cute writing was very different from Chandler's cute writing, but it wasn't any less cute. It was still pretty cute. His because the dialogue was so crisp, so brief, and so to the point that you can call it cute writing, but I mean I just call it great writing, just as I do Chandler's similes.
And of course, Dutch was major influence on him. I mean, and the influences went like Hemingway, Richard Bissell, who just kind of popped up when we were doing kill shot research. He started thinking about Bissell again and how Bissell gave, you know, uh, had the sense of humor that Hemingway did not have. But
Right.
then, of course, the major influence was George V. Higgins and the
Yeah.
Friends of Eddie Coyle,
Yeah.
and
I
that
know.
that that he said set him free. That he was able to the he talked about the casual use of obscenities and no longer worrying about what his mother might think.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he talked about Friends of Eddie Coyle a million times. I for personally, I thought George V. Higgins was a totally one note writer. Every character sounded exactly the same, which is very different. Dutch could make, half a dozen characters, and he didn't have to identify who was speaking. You'd recognize it from the language that was used, the cadence of the speech. Uh, I don't share. I didn't share Dutch's great love of Eddie Coyle and George V. Higgins in general. I think that one book, was really terrific, but they were all the same after that.
Yeah. He reviewed one time. He reviewed The Rat on Fire, and I think that was an earlier one that he also admired. But yeah, it's kind of like well known that Higgins did not exactly expand, but I mean it really like it really gave him like an entree into the world of crime fiction, which he was still transitioning from, the period where the Western period ended, and then he had his unhappy career as a screenwriter, and dealt with all that BS, and then wrote a few books that were kind of transitional. But then with 52 Pickup, that's when he really, began to hit his stride. The equivalent of Chandler's Los Angeles. He had Detroit, and he was really able to just mine that for everything it was
Yeah,
worth.
just for a while though, because he then started, using Florida quite a
Yeah,
lot, and other places, Cuba, for example.
yeah. He started.
But Detroit, yeah, the Detroit novel, City Primeval, was just such a terrific portrait of Detroit, and it was my favorite book for a long time.
And he really, I mean, you were familiar with like Don Fine and the way that that he
I
uh,
I knew Don
was
Fine, yes,
was Dutch's editor at Dell,
I know.
and then he started Arbor House, right? And
And he understood, he got Dutch, he understood Dutch. He really poured a lot of time, energy, money into promoting Dutch and to making him a really successful writer, which he hadn't been, as we all know. And Fine, who was a horrible human being, but had a great eye and was very responsible for the great success that Dutch had.
Dutch would tell these stories about how he thought that at any moment Fine was going to like literally explode because he was so angry all the time, and
Yeah, I
you
know.
know, but yeah, and then yeah, and that Arbor House period really got him to the
Yeah,
pinnacle by the mid '80s, and then
yeah. I mean, he wrote Stick, Cat Chaser, City Primeval,
Split
uh,
Images.
and Split Images, and then is that's when he wrote the big book. They published it in a different way. Uh, oh
Blitz.
God, Glitz, yeah, I was going to say the neon cover Glitz, and it broke him out. He went from selling whatever he was selling, probably between 5 and 10,000 copies, to becoming a bestseller.
To the
Bandits
cover.
and Bandits and Glitz became huge, huge books,
I know
and
because Bandits was like probably the most remaindered book that he wrote because or like
but yeah, but true. I mean, everybody think, oh my God, it was remainder. The fact is, though, that Arbor House printed so many copies and sold a lot. Uh, just because you remainder a book doesn't mean it was a failure. Uh, I mean, as a publisher, you'd rather sell them than remainder them. But it did get a lot of books out there. And you know what? Those remainder copies found a new audience for Dutch. People who didn't want to spend $25 for a hardcover book and spend $3 for a hardcover remainder book, and found new readers.
well, he is currently still, I guess, in print. I mean, HarperCollins and their Morrow imprint and their Mariner imprint. The entire canon is out there, and they've just re-released some of the Chip Kidd covers from the '90s. Did you think that was cool when Wiley, his agent Andrew Wiley, brought together the two publishers under the same design? Did you like that?
Well, yeah, I mean, Andrew Wiley is a very, very, very smart guy and really understands um, marketing. Uh, he tried. I met him for lunch. I was trying to buy the new book, whatever it was at the time, and he said, "Well, it's $1 million." Uh, and Dutch's sales didn't. They were good, but they weren't worth $1 million. And he said, but part of the deal is you have to publish all of his backlist and give me $20,000 a book. I said, most of them are in print. He said, well, look, they have licenses of 7 years, and a lot of them will go out of print at that time, and then you can publish it. I said, wait a minute, you want me to pay you $20,000 for a book that I can't publish for another 4 years? And he said, yeah, just wait. I said, I don't think we can do this. I'm sorry. I mean, I don't really have the bandwidth to do that. Uh, but you got the bigger companies to collaborate on this, and it was a great marketing genius. He is. He's that kind. He's a genius about that.
But I mean, do you think today, I mean, judging from like, just what you hear from customers and from colleagues that he is really still, in people's minds, his
Well,
work?
not as much as when he was alive, because he would show up, he would do events of one kind or another. He give talks, and was on talk shows and did things like that. So it's not quite as much. There's always new writers coming along. I'm not saying he's forgotten. Of course he's not, but he's not first in everybody's mind the way he was 20 years ago. I love Dutch. I love the man. I really did. I was one of my, for quite a few years, he was one of my closest friends. And I loved every minute that I spent with him. He was just a joy to be with. So I would do anything for him.